And now they decided to break up the Habsburg Empire because they want Austria wedded to Catholic Bavaria for the Third Reich. So what do? They start World War I. And when they did that, they assassinated Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo in 1914. And that is a very interesting assassination because Prinkup didn't kill him. Franz Ferdinand was killed by a passenger, Eric, with a gun. Shot him point blank inside the vehicle, just as Kennedy was shot point blank inside the vehicle by the driver. And they blamed it on Prinkup. All right? The gun that was used by the assassin, Eric, the Jesuits had in their museum until 2002 or 2003. And I have a picture of the Jesuit with the gun that they had. Right. The Jesuit who gave last rites to Prinkup was the Jesuit, and he's recording all the history. The Jesuits are also on trial there in Vienna to make sure that what really happened doesn't come out. And there is a Jesuit historian who did this, and it's a book called Sarajevo. So the Jesuits were behind the assassination of Ferdinand, and this ultimately then is blamed on Serbia. Serbia then is aligned with Russia. Russia is brought into the war. Austria is aligned with Germany. That's brought into the war. And so the Jesuits, through the assassination of Franz Ferdinand, started World War I. They also did the same thing with the Lusitania. You'll like this story. The Lusitania was loaded with bullets, bombs, you name it. And when the Lusitania came over, Winston Churchill was the Lord of the Admiralty. And Winston Churchill was telling the commander of the ship, the captain of the ship, where to sail or where to steam. And so the captain steamed right in front of a U-boat that was waiting for it. So we could sink it and then use that as a justification to bring America in on the side of Britain against Germany. See, they concoct these things, and we cannot be taken in by these horrible designs anymore. And they pulled the same thing with 9/11. And one of the things that I have said is they're not, over my dead body, they're not going to get away with 9/11 like they got away with Pearl Harbor, like they got away with Lusitania, like they got away with the Gulf of Tonkin. I'm telling it high and low, the Archbishop of New York did this with the Knights of Malta controlling the CIA. And we do not belong in that papal crusade. There's no reason to be over there. Bring the troops home immediately. It's a crime to have them there.
Eric, do you have the history about the driver of that limousine that Kennedy was...
Yes.
Yes. Well, I didn't want to divert you because you're doing fantastic. So
okay, well, we did with Franz Ferdinand, the starting of one. You want to go to the driver, William Greer, of the Kennedy assassination? Want to talk about him?
Wasn't there another prince, king, his name was Peter, I believe, of Croatia?
King Peter, yes. Stephen assassinated him. Pavelic assassinated him. Because Peter wasn't going to go along with things here. But Peter was, I believe, he was a Serb.
Yes.
He was Serbian. So they assassinated him because the Serbs are Orthodox, and the Jesuits, because the Serbs will not go along with the Vatican, they decreed their death in World War I, or World War II. So that's why they killed nearly 1 million Orthodox Serbs using the Ustashi, and the Ustashi was brought to power by the SS. Himmler put Pavelic in power. It was a huge inquisition. And I have a picture of Hitler who was riding a horse as a crusader. It's a crusade. The whole Nazi World War II was a huge papal crusade to kill Orthodox Christians, Jews in Europe, and Protestant Prussians, and Reformed people in Holland.
That's what the pageants were for, that they had.
Yes. Yes.
Celebrations.
Yes. It instilled all this desire of a crusade. And then, of course, Versailles instilled in them the desire to get even, because Versailles wrecked Germany. And they didn't have to do that. Germany wasn't responsible for starting that war. It was Britain. And I cover this in my book. It's called the Russian Imperial Treaty, where in 1892, Britain, France, and Russia entered into a secret treaty that if any of them were attacked by Germany, or there was any closeness to war, they would immediately attack. It's horrible. So Germany was set up for this, but then you have a Kaiser who was ultimately serving the Jesuits another way. But see, he was betrayed because 800,000 soldiers, Russian soldiers, were mobilized in the east of Prussia, and military mobilization is an act of war. So the Kaiser was begging, and I have the telegrams between the Kaiser and Nicholas after they'd already agreed upon peace. The Kaiser saying, "Stop this mobilization. This is war. If it's war you want, then war you shall have."
Eric, doesn't make sense though. Kennedy was Catholic, right?
Yes.
So evidently he's a threat to the system.
Yes.
And the driver that took him out was obviously had Masonic ties.
And he was a Protestant.
Yeah, go over both of the Kennedys if you
Just
would.
one other thing, before we get that far up, two other things I'd like to ask you. One is the Russo-Japanese War.
Russian-Japanese War?
Russo-Japanese, 1905.
Yes.
And the other one is
We're going to be here till midnight.
the massacre of the Christians by the Kurds
Uh-huh.
in 1906.
Armenians. The Armenians.
The
Armenian
Armenian
massacre.
massacre.
Okay. Armenian massacre. One of the purposes for World War I was to kill as many non-Roman Catholic Armenian Christians in Turkey. And the ones behind this were the Jesuits using their Frankist Sabbatean Frankists, the Masonic Jewish Labor Zionists, because Talat Pasha was a Jew and he was very high up in Hamid II's, the Sultan of Turkey's empire. And so they worked together in the mass murder of the Armenians, and so did Kaiser Wilhelm II. He countenanced all that. And John Foster Dulles, he countenanced that too. Who later became Secretary of State under Eisenhower. He countenanced all that. It was a massacre, and the Turks today deny that it happened. They're Armenian Holocaust deniers. It's 2 million people, that's right, from about 1895 to 1920. So it was a Vatican annihilation, and you want to get this, using Islam. They used Islam to do their dirty work. Just as they used Islam to do their dirty work against the Serbians in World War II. Remember, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem was the select guest of Adolf Hitler in Berlin from 1941 to 1945. And the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem helped Hitler in the killing of as many Jews as possible and these Orthodox Serbs, because he was the one responsible for recruiting the Handschar Division. Okay. So that's the Armenians, and the other one was Russo-Japanese War. Okay, remember that it was decided that the Tsar of Russia had to go because of Alexander II and Alexander I. And by the way, the Jesuits were still suppressed in Russia at this time because they were suppressed in 1820 by Alexander I. Alexander also shut every Masonic lodge in 1822, and for which he was poisoned in 1825. Praise God, I like him. I have a picture hanging up at that time. So the Jesuits decided that it's the end of the Tsar. So Nicholas II was going to go along with this. So what happens is the Japanese sneak attack the Russian Navy that had been built by John Paul Jones. And they sink it. They destroy the Russian fleet. And remember, Russia has been under attack since the Crimean War in 1856 to 59. That's when they lose the holy sites in Jerusalem. That's when the British, the French, and the Turks attack Russia. They're busy hammering down Russia at this time, Tsarist Russia, because they want to conquer Orthodox Russia, the third Moscow for the Pope. So now, in 1904, they have the Russo-Japanese War. They destroy his fleet. And guess who is the intermediary, the guy who negotiates the peace between Japan and Russia? Dirty Theodore Roosevelt, for which he gets the Nobel Peace Prize. Okay? And remember at this time also that Emperor Meiji is the emperor that the Jesuits put in power when he was 12 years old after they assassinated his father, Emperor Komi, at 36, for refusing to allow the white men to enter Japan, for refusing to allow any of the Catholic Christians into Japan again. So they control Japan. Japan is the sword of the church because they control Emperor Meiji. They control Germany through Kaiser. They